Welcome, everybody, to the Men's Sexual Mastery Podcast. I am so honored to be joined today by my first guest on the podcast, a dear brother who we've crossed paths a few times before. I dropped in on one of your workshops about a year and a half ago at Unison Fest, and we have a lot of mutual connections, and it is my great pleasure and excitement to have you on, JP Kingston. Thank you,
Thank
brother.
you. Yeah, you're welcome, Ben. And thanks for having me on, man. It feels so good to reconnect and kindle this relationship as we converse and grow together. And yeah, it's so cool to see the threads of connections that are here for both of us. And yeah, man, just excited to flourish in this relationship.
Likewise, brother. We were talking just this last week about, the field is wide open. There's so much need for guys right now who are waking up to their sexual energy and coming into contact with the source of their power, with their life force. And there's such a need for guys to be stepping in and leading and teaching and bringing through these codes in whatever ways they can. And I love the spirit of openness and collaboration and like non-competition that exists between us and between honestly everybody I've met in this space. It's just like the more of us, the better. It's go time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's part of the new age. Don't like the word new age, but the next age and the next phase that we're all stepping into is away from competition and into collaboration. And yeah, I find the more that I'm able to collaborate. I've competed enough in my days as a college baseball player, and um, yeah, I love collaborating and connecting. And yeah, one of the phrases I always use is the high tide rises all ships, and we each have our own high tide to offer. And so when we're surrounded in each other's presence and in community, it's like we all kind of raise this little tide in each and every one of us. So yeah, might as well just allow it to be there rather than fight against it.
Yeah, I love that, man. Yeah, I have another visual of like we're all these puzzle pieces, and each of us has codes. And I tell brothers like as we unlock like what's awakening in you is awakening in me, and that's why we're
Hmm.
talking right now, actually. And like we're all on this level playing field, actually, and I say to guys like I have a lot of maps, I got tools, I've come far in my journey, but by no means am I trying to be a guru or anything. And I don't know if you read Thich Nhat Hanh. He's one of my favorite, inspirations. But he said the age of the over and the new
Hmm.
guru Sangha or the spiritual community.
Hmm.
That kind of reminds me of what you're talking about, like doing this together this time, not in sort of some sort of hierarchical way, which is what actually a lot of this Taoist sexual alchemy knowledge came from that way, right? So this really does feel fitting as the new evolution of the Tao.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I want to be a student as much as I'm a teacher, and
Mhm.
never more than one than the other.
Ooh,
So
that's
yeah, I'm
potent.
here for it, man.
Dude, those are, oh man, I feel it's so nice talking to you. I feel like I'm hearing things that like remind me of a lot of things, yeah, I feel and say all the time too. Like the best teachers are always remain students. And yeah, I think that one of my teachers talks a lot about, he's like black belt swagger, white belt mind, black belt swagger, white belt mind. Keep coming back.
I love that. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna pocket that one.
Yeah. Yeah, anytime I walk into any situation, it's like keeping that humble mind, just that beginner's mind that where all the magic happens and just curiosity, non-judgment, while yes, standing strong in our rootedness and our power too. So
Hmm.
I see you in that, brother. I really do. So
Thank you, man. Yeah, and I see that in you as well. Yeah.
whoosh. Thanks, bro. Uh, to start just by hearing a little bit just of what's happening in your world. You've been in this 3 years, right? And I'd
Hmm.
love to just hear a little bit about the evolution. What's kind of the latest JP in JP's world? Like what's some of the latest and greatest developments on your end, what you're seeing in your work?
Mm, that's a great question. Um, yeah, well, I came across this work 10 years ago, via text, via the Tao of Sexology, and um, didn't know how to apply any of it. It's just like read it and tried to make sense of it, and it was challenging. And a few years ago, I connected with a mutual brother, and he invited me to start teaching with him. I've been a teacher of breathwork and movement and mindset for, yeah, about 8+ years. And so I became a student again of a lot of this lineage. And it felt like I had definitely been practicing it for many different lifetimes. It was like a remembering of like, oh yeah, I know this stuff. Oh yeah, this makes sense. Oh yeah, I remember this. And um, yeah, and I just kind of ran with it. Um, but I would say the evolution is really uh, getting back into. I mean, I'm studying under a teacher of both of ours now, which is super exciting, Master Lauren Johnson, and attended my first in-person event with Montauk Chia a few months ago in London. And like we were talking about just a moment ago, um, yeah, I think the major thing that's coming up for me in this evolution is simplicity and coming back to the really simple stuff. In the beginning, I would kind of just give people everything at once. Um, or in a way, I mean, there was a level to it, but it was still like going all out and teaching it much like I would, in a way, teach a yoga class. Um, And now I'm really focusing on the foundational principles and pillars of the universal healing Tao. And yeah, helping people breathe into their belly, breathe into their balls, starting with that, helping people remember and remind them to smile using the inner smile meditation, or what I believe you share is the smiling king. Um, and so yeah, really focusing on these foundational principles to detoxify and to tonify. One of the things that I really appreciate about the Tao is this idea of purge, tonify, and then harness energy. And in the beginning, I just wanted to harness the sexual energy, but I had all this toxicity still within me, whether that was from food, from mindset, people that I was surrounding myself with, or over consuming alcohol and recreational drugs. And the more that I focused on like the detoxification through nourishment, but also through the sounds and shaking and just simple purging practices, it was almost like there was this breath starting to happen within me so that I could tonify the body. And so that's been really key for my practices, taking it slow, ensuring that the men that I work with are working with a clean vessel. Because if we're trying to purge, or sorry, if we're trying to harness sexual energy, but we have all this toxicity within us, the two main characteristics of sexual energy is to bind and amplify. And so we will bind and amplify the toxicity within us. And yeah, sexual energy is super powerful. It's very powerful and it can be very dangerous. And so it's not something we just fuck around and find out with. I mean, you can do that, right? But we have to be very intentional. I find it's important for us to be very intentional. And so that's become the evolution is like taking it slow, bringing the simplicity forward and building upon the foundations. And then from there, we can get to maybe more of the exciting stuff or like the really juicy, maybe some edgy, uncomfortable stuff where we start to harness that sexual energy with more of these advanced practices.
Yeah, bro. Back to basics. I love that. And I love the clearing the vessel and making sure the vessel is clean before we bring in this, yeah, high octane fuel. That's wise, and I think that's why a lot of these ancient lineages, I think, were so perhaps one reason why they were guarded, because it is fire. And yeah, I really honor you for bringing in that wisdom and slowing guys down a bit. I say the same thing like in a lot of my training. It's like sex sells and everybody wants the goods, but it's actually in a way it's from we have to start at the roots. Like I talk all the time about the analogy of the flower doesn't bloom till the roots are strong, the stems solid, the leaves are green. In nature, sexual blooming, sexual fulfillment is the final stage in development in the wellness of the organism, So yeah, everything you're saying feels completely resonant. And I do think that that's really needed, in the age of information overload and like I call it like mental masturbation. There's just like so much coming in. There's so much desire to expand. I forget the word you used earlier. Yeah, like harnessing energy for the sake of energy. That's actually part of the same old patriarchal colonizer, whatever you want to call it, capitalistic shadow masculine pattern of like more, 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 more for the sake of more, which is actually coming from a place of void within. And that actually can become, yeah, toxic. So, yeah, I really appreciate that perspective and being able to start from the inside out and ensure that, yeah, our vessels are clear and that we're actually, because at the end of the day, what's cool, the biggest the breakthrough I think a lot of guys get at some point in this work is like this energy is actually infinite. And the only thing limiting us from infinite orgasmic, life force bliss energy is just our ability to actually relax into it, actually, and regulate our nervous system. Like there's nothing to get. The training is all to deconstruct the patterns that we've inherited, the ancestral patterns we may be carrying, all this stuff in our bodies. And it's such great news actually to be like, actually, it's easier to be more orgasmic. It's more relaxed and it takes time to like break out of the old patterns. But once we start to do that, it feels 1,000x better just to be, and it affects every area of our lives, every area. So yeah, brother, I appreciate that approach. That's what it's all about.
Hmm. Yeah. And I just add on with that. One of the other things that I love so much about the Taoist lineage and these practices is that it's very grounding. And I, in my past, just wanted to ascend and like, keep going upward and, chase enlightenment. And I was losing myself in it. And I think a lot of people do. We lose ourselves and we kind of float and don't become of this earth. And in the Tao, it says, go to the earth and heaven will chase you. And so we root to rise. And just like that flower analogy that you were sharing. And so yeah, it's very grounding. And the more that we ground, the more that we can allow our tree to reach for the sky.
Yeah, I love that phrase, we got a root to rise. Did you come up with that?
And I can't say I did. It's something I say all the time. I don't know. I may have. No, I've just been saying it for a while.
It came from the collective hive mind at some point, or is coming.
Yeah, yeah,
I love that, man. Well, I'd love to hear a little more on the simplicity, theme for you. And it sounds like what's really present. And as somebody who's been deep in this, and you said, was it 10 years ago that you first came across this and teaching for quite a few number of years? What practices or what approaches, you mentioned the detox, but just for guys maybe who are just stepping into this, if there were some simple first steps that you would advise, for any guy getting into this and starting to clear their vessel or basic practices. I know you mentioned the inner smile, the breath, some of the stuff. Could you elaborate a little more on that?
sure. Yeah. I think, I mean, as far as a movement practice goes, I think shaking is one of the most valuable things that we can do. A somatic shake, just standing up for 3 to 7 to 10 upwards to 20, 30 minutes. If you have any disease in your body, I've heard Master Chia say that shake for 3 minutes a day and 20 to 30 minutes if you have disease in your body. And so it's very simple. You just stand and shake it out. Uh, it's like once I start doing that, if I'm noticing that I don't want to move very much today, I'm feeling a little stagnant, feeling a little down, I just get up, start shaking, and all of a sudden I feel my joints starting to open up and move, and I can start to like stretch a little bit, do some pandiculations, and maybe I start to dance, maybe I start to do some push-ups. From there, it just like gets the vessels opened up and moving. It's really great for, yeah, moving blood and lymph. And so I would say start there. That's a great purging practice. Tapping the body is also so key, really simple. Um, yeah, and breathing, breathing into the low belly. Most people have an inverted breathing pattern, which means they breathe from the chest up rather than the belly, chest, head. And so just learning to breathe into the lower dantian, taking that the next step further into the testicles. It's yeah, if you just start to do that, you're going to start to move the sexual energy or move your energy into deeper parts of your body. Because as you were alluding to earlier, a big key in this is learning to relax. And if we can communicate to all parts of our body, bring some chi there, some life force energy, the body starts to say, oh, okay, cool. We've got what we need. We're nourished. And from there, we can start to communicate and send sexual energy there and go into more of the advanced practices by, yeah, multiplying it, duplicating it, um, and whatnot. I actually, I just heard this the other day, and it's from Ram Dass, a Ram Dass meditation, because when I'm talking about breathing into your balls with a lot of guys, they're like, "What do you mean? What are you talking about? How do you do that? How do you breathe into your balls?" And I've always used the analogy of just imagine your testicles are starting to expand like a balloon as you inhale. And as they exhale, as you exhale, they just start to gently squeeze. And I like that. I like that balloon image, but I think this could be even more simple for people. And that's just imagine that your testicles have nostrils. And what would it feel like to allow the air to just rise right into your testicles? Or what he actually says is imagine you have nostrils on your heart. And so, because in the Tao, you can do hair breathing, you can do bone breathing, um, you can breathe into, specific organs. It's quite advanced, but at the simple end of it all, it's just, what would it feel like? What would it feel like? What would it be like to have nostrils on this part of my body? Because, yeah, most of us don't have a relationship with our spleen or with our liver or with our kidneys. And the only relationship we've learned to have with our genitals is masturbation and ejaculation or sex. And there's so much more to it all. Um, but yeah, keeping it simple. What would it feel like to have nostrils on my testicles?
I love that, bro. I love that. And yeah, so much of this work, I don't even call it, I wouldn't even call it sex necessarily, like, or, the word masturbation, like even these terms, like, I'm sure you're aware the masturbation, the etymology of that comes from the Old English. It's like to defile oneself, I believe. So like,
Yeah, it's a Latin. Latin word manus stupare, to
Yeah.
defile oneself. Yeah.
And even the word sex, like I'm reclaiming that word kind of like God, kind of like a lot of these.
Mm,
It's like I think what a lot of what I would call those default patterns we've inherited, they're not bad. I mean, they can be really beautiful too. But like a lot of it without knowing it is unconsciously, I just call it porn reenactment. Um,
mm,
because that's all that we've been taught, we've been programmed a lot of
mm,
these things without realizing it, But yeah, I do definitely think coming back to simplicity and allowing for more realms, new neural pathways, essentially, of sensation, of experience, which can often come from kind of that quantum imaginal realm, from that childlike essence in the beginning. And, like you're speaking to, bringing that awareness just and trying out some new, and a lot of these are ancient, I call them technologies, actually. I mean, they are
yeah.
technologies, rewiring our brains and our nervous systems. And for some guys in the beginning, it can seem almost like incredulous, a little bit, that you could be like imagining what it would feel like to have nostrils in your balls. But if you actually just try it for a while, or some of these different practices, like you literally will be opening up sensations in your body that you didn't have before. I mean, same thing, the microcosmic orbit, a lot of the stuff I tell guys in the beginning, like you could call this a visualization, but actually what we're doing is we're using archetypes and imagined human perceptions of things as the things that we can grasp to touch into things that are a sensation in the body, which do exist in every single human being. So it doesn't matter necessarily exactly the formula or the thing it is we're imagining, but it is the feeling underneath it that is actually rewiring the brain and the body into these deeper sensations and deeper pleasures. So and one other thing I just want to mention too, for anyone who's starting this out too, is like you spoke to it for a moment, but with moving our chi into these areas, moving our awareness, like there's the old saying that energy goes where or energy flows where our attention goes, and that's essentially what all this is. That's what
Yeah.
chi is just our awareness, and by bringing awareness and breath and these basic, super basic principles to these areas of our body that we're often completely numb to, we can start to unlock and release stagnant, held energy, much of which I think is ancestral, especially if going deep into the pelvic floor and the genitals, the anus, the prostate, like that's really the root, but also in the organs, like I've been getting deeper into this understanding too, these different approaches and the more Chinese medicine approaches of every organ holding different emotions, right? And I know there's the six healing sounds as another, foundational practice. So yeah, I think learning to bring the simplicity, like you're saying, and just feel, is like that's really what it is like my teacher Chris Bale says in order for energy to move, it has to be felt. There's no getting
Yeah.
around it. And I always
Yeah.
say in order to feel, we have to relax,
Hmm.
to get out of the head, and we have to breathe. So moving that parasympathetic mode, getting out of the loops of our mind of, which most of us don't even know, like if we're raised in the matrix, we don't even know how enslaved we are to our own minds. But as we do these practices, as we learn to slow down and deepen into the simplicity, into that what's there, which can be uncomfortable at first, right? There's a lot of resistance to feeling that. But as we go into it little by little, it can unlock deeper levels of sensation, of pleasure, of actually like wisdom and knowledge and energy and connection to our own masculinity and our clarity in life, combined with things like the detoxing you're talking about. I actually would love to hear more about some of the detox work you're doing, because that's something you're integrating, you said, now into your work, which you weren't doing professionally before. I'd love to hear what are some of your protocols?
Yeah. Well, I, I would actually say much of my work uh, up until about, well, I was working with a nutrition company 5 years ago, where I was supporting most people with their detox. Um, And I wouldn't say that I wasn't focusing on detox because it was definitely a big part of it. Um, but I was more so just going right into the sexual kung fu practices. Um, and giving men like the sexual kung fu tools without saying like, hey, let's start with this first and foremost. Um, but yeah, a big detox protocol that I utilize are, uh, I mean, especially with on the nutrition side, is humic and fulvic acids. Um, so Shilajit is a great supplement for people to start chelating heavy metals um, and pesticides out of their body. Um, and of course, really focusing on the six healing sounds, um, because the six healing sounds are, it's like we can just like start to ring out our organs with those sounds. And those sounds came from, are you familiar with where the sounds came from?
Haven't heard this.
Yeah, so they came from basically very ill people in China, um, who had either like liver problems or kidney problems, and they would start to do like acupressure points on their organs, and there was a reactionary sound that was coming out of each one of them. That was the common sound. And so the sound with the liver is SH. It was like, kind of this like detoxifying. And so, um, yeah, our organs, glands, tissues can hold on to toxicity or emotions. And I find those to be foundational and essential for my clients and people to do on a very regular basis. If you're feeling anger, breathe in green kindness into your liver and ring it out by saying SH, just a long SH. Shh. I don't know if it's coming through or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so yeah, I would say in the past I was focusing more on just like going right into more of that genital reflexology work, and kind of brushing over the six healing sounds, brushing over the shaking, brushing over the inner smile, giving it to them. But now it's just like, no, we're going to start here. And we're going to take our time before we go into more of this advanced stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting. The six healing sounds are so powerful and so foundational. And I remember when I studied with Montauk, that was like the inner smile and the six healing sounds were like the foundations he taught us. And even with Jonathan White, same thing. Like, but looking back for me, when I first, especially, well, my first learning of this was like with Jonathan White. And I remember, I think it was in module one or module two, he was like trying to explain it, even as we are right now. He was like trying to say, like, hey, you got like this may seem kind of weird or far out. He's like, when I first came across it, I was like, what the fuck is it? Like, what is this random practice? But he's like, this is one of the most crucial foundational practices. And even then, even hearing him say that and doing it the first time, maybe I was just still so numb in my body to the effects of it. And also, it seems a little woo-woo at first. Which one of my favorite phrases, this is kind of an anecdote or a side note, but I always love saying, in this work, we're not about the woo-woo, we're about the woo-way. The middle path. That's WUWEI for those who haven't heard of that, but little Taoist joke. But yeah,
Nice.
the
That's
woo
awesome.
way at that middle path. But if you're coming from the outside, it can seem pretty woo woo, not so woo way. The six healing sounds, it's all perception. But yeah, I looking back now, I totally get, that yeah, this is a essential part of the foundations, and we can't race ahead. We can't be too eager, and especially as you mentioned earlier, with some of these things being like fire, there can be complications. I mean, this is another subject, but Chris Bale mentioned that and he came out with it. He was talking about coming out with this recently, I think in the last year, but he knew it'd be kind of controversial, but he's mentioned that guys actually shouldn't be practicing semen retention for extended periods of time if they're not doing lots of these practices like qigong or a lot of these sexual alchemy practices, that it actually can be harmful. And so that's been a big message of mine, coming to this space has been the whole no fap, no nut November, see, even the word semen retention, retaining, repressing, the negative focus on like not doing the thing. I use the word semen intention and like trying to just, yeah, bring things gently and in a, yeah, just a more not such a rigid masculine way. But Chris was telling me like that there's been times he's had people literally with medical issues because they're holding on to their semen for whatever 90 days, and they're
Yeah.
doing streaks without doing the groundwork first. So do you have any thoughts on that? Just some of the risks associated with rushing into this stuff, without these foundations?
Yeah, totally. Like I said, sexual energy is not something just to fuck around with. It's very powerful. Fuck around and find out, you know? Um,
Burn your hand on
but
the stove. Yeah.
what's that?
You can burn your hand on the stove if you need to. That's going to be a lot.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is doctors have found studies that those who hold in their semen um can have prostate problems. Like that, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And my theory is, and I'm happy to be challenged on it, but my deep theory is that is because men aren't moving the sexual energy. And more importantly, they're not pumping the prostate on a regular basis. And what happens when we ejaculate is there's this reaction, there's this muscle contraction in the perineum, in our whole sexual center that starts to nourish. I mean, it's flushing out the prostate, but it's also nourishing the prostate. It's activating it. And so, um, if we're using the Taoist practices and moving energy, doing perineum squeezes or um, prostate work, which I know you're a big fan of, I think that can be really supportive. Um, I, I was a big proponent for semen retention for a while, and I also was like, you know what, this is limiting. And once I started working with Master Lauren Johnson, I love yours as well, semen intention. And I love his, which is seminal expansion. So it's learning to expand the semen in the body. Because yeah, when we're saying retention, it has that like suppression, negative connotation. And like I said in the beginning, sexual energy has two primary characteristics, which is to bind and amplify. And if we're not doing the detoxification, if we're not doing the inner work, all of that energy is going to come out. I talk to people all the time, like, yeah, I'm on day 9, but I'm feeling super angry. And I'm like, are you moving sexual energy? They're like, what? I'm like,
Mhm.
dude, don't even like go have a sacred ceremony and release your seed. Or just release it, just release it, start over, breathe deep. Um, and I say that with humility. It's like, yeah, it's really potent work. And the ancient yogis, they were detoxifying 10,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. They're talking about detoxification, the importance of it. And I think one of the simplest ways, I know I didn't really get into this, um, but in one of the simplest ways to detoxify is through the out breath. 80% of our detoxification happens from our lungs. And so you could even just sit and breathe and know that you're detoxifying. Getting into a parasympathetic state, resting, digesting. This is really going to support you in a very simple way. And of course, there's always more that you can do, but as with anything, I think it's important just to start small. Start with one step at a time.
Love that. Keeping it simple. Back to the elegance of simplicity. I love that. Yeah, I'd throw in there too, for anybody who's, maybe just starting this journey too, the easiest, most potent detox protocol I found is fasting. Whether
Hmm.
that's a water fast or a dry fast, like your body has all the apparatus, and that's the single most quickest way to detox your body, like hands down in my experience. Yeah, and it doesn't require you buying anything.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, definitely. I was curious to actually, so I know we were just sharing some stuff for guys who are just starting. I kind of wanted to ramp into something that's more cutting edge and like
Yeah,
hear
sure.
a little bit of your thoughts on, because it's related to everything we're talking about right now. So, and actually, so yeah, some of my work most recently has been, in my personal research, let's call it quote unquote, my sex lab. In our training, we recommend every man set up a sex lab, like set up your sex lab, get on your, set up your devotional practice to that. But in my sex lab and a lot of the prostate work I've been doing, I've been playing around and actually also receiving some instruction from Master Lauren, and combining it with some of my other, just combining information and research and kind of like sharing everything on these cutting edge, like what is the some of these quicker pathways, even like we're talking about with detoxing, for activating and releasing tension in the pelvic floor and opening up to becoming more and more multi-orgasmic, which the prostate is very much like a spectrum of that. It's not a light switch. But in my prostate research recently, I've been combining the six healing sounds. So I'll have the anaros in, be doing the six healing sounds, and I'll have like a massage ball that's, the spiky ones that's like about the size of a softball. And I'll be
Hmm.
lying down on like I have like a sheepskin. It's really sexy, my sexy time, sexy lab. And I'll be lying on a sheepskin and practicing moving, like rolling around deep in my breathing, releasing the healing sounds as I'm on each organ with that
Hmm.
organ,
Hmm.
and be breathing into doing my, yeah, my lower dantian, like breathing into the prostate, releasing tension in the pelvic floor, and noticing and just staying with my breath and like what the somatic response is in my body, and especially my pelvic floor, my butt cheeks, all of it, to the different organs. And as I'm exhaling with each sound of the organ, I've had some really crazy, like openings that have been happening with
Mm.
the combination of the prostate with the six healing sounds, with the abdominal massage and a massage ball lying on my stomach doing the healing sounds. And I had one the other day where I was on my spleen, and releasing the whole, like releasing my spleen. And I literally had this, oh man, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like this orgasmic, but also, like some of these, it's like, is it pleasure? Is it pain? And it was sort of like this opening of my whole left side of my spine, like up to my neck,
Mm.
like the base of my cranial sacral area, all the way down to my sacrum.
Mm.
The spleen, having this ball on my spleen and releasing, and somehow something happened where I started like shaking, and like the whole left side of my spine, like I could feel it almost lengthen. And it was like almost this massive release, but also like this awareness of this tension that just sort of I could feel like a whole layer shed. Yeah, it was really cathartic. And yeah, this is pretty new for me, exploring I call it stacking, like, and this is kind of like a lot of the work, and especially in the work I do and in men's sexual mastery, we talk about like stacking different practices. And if we have the foundation of the smiling king, and like the breath and the vibration, letting out vocalizations and relaxation, the inner smile, all of that, and then we start going into like testicular breathing, or orgasmic breathing, I call it. There's many different practices, hundreds, but as we are in this age, this cutting age time of being able to talk over Zoom while you're in Copenhagen and I'm here in Austin, like sharing notes in these ways, I mean, I'm just so excited to be at the cutting edge of this research, because I can feel there are things being explored right now. And even in your like naked sexual kung fu work, or I know you probably have all sorts of other realms of your research. Let's call it, I love calling it research because it really is.
It, it is research for sure.
Yeah, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then, yeah, any breakthroughs you've been having or any research in any particular practices right now that you're feeling you're unlocking some things that have never been unlocked perhaps before.
Yeah. Uh, I love hearing your process and your study that you're going through. Um, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. And yeah, I mean, even Montauk Chia says when you massage the testicles, oftentimes most guys have back pain. Most of us have back pain, low back pain. We're sitting too much, or our testicles are up too high. And so just by pulling down on the testicles, he says that you can unlock back pain. And he's like, I've worked with many people. After a certain amount of time, their back unlocks, their back feels better just because they're pulling on their testicles. And so, yeah, the vagus nerve connects from the head all the way down to the root. And if there's impediment anywhere, it's going to cause tension in the body. And so, if we can find ways to relax all the way up and down the spine, into the organs, yeah, I can tell that there's so much possibility for people. Um, and especially, yeah, like the thing that I love so much about these practices is being able to stack them. Because when I was masturbating, I don't masturbate anymore, but when I was, it was just sitting by the computer and just being, vigilant of anybody coming in or making sure no one sees me. And now I have beautiful solo cultivation sessions where I get into my space, I do some deep breathing, and yeah, even last night I was stacking some really simple practices on top of each other. I was stacking the inner smile with Montauk offers the 8 short thrusts and 1 deep thrust. So it's like 9 thrusts altogether. And it's a way to prevent premature ejaculation because, vulnerably sharing, I was a 2 pump chump for much of my life. And, that sexual energy, like, is still like it's very active within me and it can get really hot and I have to learn to cool myself down. But yeah, I was doing 8 short thrusts and the smiling, and Master Lauren also he gave me this practice of um you inhale down into the balls, you do perineum power, so you squeeze the perineum and you spiral the energy in the major energy centers along the spine. And so I was inhaling down, I was smiling, I was doing 8 short thrusts, 1 deep thrust, and I just did this to every single energy center. And like I was bringing a lot of intensity to it. And I felt like I was just in this just powerful sexual control and had just a beautiful orgasmic solo cultivation session. And it's like, oh, cool. The thing with all of this is like, I've learned I don't want to be a robot when I'm in the bed. Because we can get in our head and then the partner's like, what are you doing? And it's like, it's most important to be relaxed and to, be in the flow of it. But there are things like once we integrate it enough, I find we can come back to it when it comes to making love with another. And so, um, yeah, I just had this really beautiful cultivation practice and it was so orgasmic and Um, I noticed my body was even more relaxed. I'd done some heavy exercise um, earlier this week, and my body's feeling sore. And after that, it's like, yeah, I feel much more open and relaxed and just happy for life. So that's a little bit of my research that I've been doing to stack certain practices.
Phew. Love that, bro.
And
Love
it's like I was like, man, I can't, this would be really hard to teach somebody if they don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
that.
Um, but if you're aware, you could probably pick up on a couple things.
Yeah.
I know you could figure it out.
Well, yeah, that's one last thing I'd even add for guys, is like ultimately there's a level of practice and consistent daily, I call it blisscipline, like bliss discipline practices that like having, I know you got this because you and I wouldn't be talking, you wouldn't be having those experiences without lots of devotion to like deepening in these practices. And all the information's out there, kind of like how we started this conversation. But ultimately, what it comes down to is practice, and that's in all the martial arts and all the spiritual traditions. I talk about this all the time, but it's so needed, the back to the beginning of our whole conversation, this simplicity and, getting these practices just in experiencing them firsthand. It comes down to like hours or days of practice, weeks, months, years. And it's a devotional path, and just like working out, and everything else, like there's nothing that is super beautiful that isn't usually hard fought, so and I know both of our work, is really supportive to guys being able to have that support, to go deeper into it. We have our teachers, we didn't do this alone. So I just really encourage if anyone's listening to this and resonant with JP or I or both of us, and I know we're going to be doing some collaborations in the future. Really excited about that. But yeah, to reach out because yeah, doing this alone, there's honestly, in my opinion, you can't. I don't think I could not have done this alone. You know,
Me neither.
missions that happen with these teachings and with other people who are already in those practices or these practices, like when you were just sharing going into this orgasmic state, yesterday, I had an image of just like your light body or just like you're like broadcasting this signal out. It's just like it's just like sending out a signal to the quantum field. And that's what, that I know that that's what's going on. That's the mojo. That's the je ne sais quoi. That's like when people see you and are, and I'm sure you find this too. It's like the deeper I know I go in this work, there's like that's that black belt swagger, white belt mind. There's like this thing that's behind the eyes that's like you holding your sexual energy with integrity and also with playfulness and the feminine, not just the masculine rigidity of semen retention, but the playfulness of the semen intention or expansion, as Lauren calls it. So yeah, I really encourage guys, to focus on, what if you really want to learn this stuff, if being multi-orgasmic and being the most epic lover of all time is like your jam, which I think for all of us it is, you got to prioritize it ultimately. Like you got to show up and do the reps and having support in this journey, having not just the information, which we're openly even sharing on these podcasts. Like I'm not worried about, yeah, holding back any information because I know for 99% of guys, they're caught in a loop of mental masturbation, and if you really look at it, like what has actually changed in your life or like because of just information alone.
Mhm.
Like we have this shiny object syndrome and we go from one thing to another. And there are literally between the tantric practices and Taoist practices, there's like thousands of practices. You could spend
Mhm.
the rest of your life swimming around in a sea of puzzle pieces and never actually put the pieces together
Yeah.
into a cohesive experience of shifting your entire sexual center and blueprint and experience. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I just really like to emphasize that to guys because I know anyone who's tuning into like watching this or listening to this podcast or following us in any ways, like I know for a long time I was just stuck in a pattern of consumption without integration. Ultimately, coming back to this message of simplicity, it's better to just be doing one, two, three practices, which that's the foundations of the kind of stuff that we teach consistently over time then like getting it actually can be counterproductive to just be like having the access we have to all the information, all the knowledge is actually there's like this analyzation, parallelization that comes in. So I could go on and on harping about that, but that's honestly one of my biggest emphasis is like I want guys to experience this stuff firsthand. They come in my training. That's why we have daily accountability and all the rest. It's like strip all the shit away, strip it down, back to basics, just like what you're doing, and running with that, and just letting your noticing the shifts that will happen in your body little by little over time. That's where it's
Yeah.
at. So.
Yeah. Good daily habits add up. And it doesn't need to be a lot. You don't need to set up a whole 2 hours or 3 hours for yourself to research every day. Find 15 minutes to do a few things, a few simple things, and every day that'll all stack up. And I'll just say one last thing on my own experiences. I teach every week. So in a way, I'm practicing, but the times where I don't prioritize my own practice, I notice that I have less control over my sexual energy. And when I come back to my own practice, even though I'm in a way practicing on a level each week, yeah, it's like, okay, just reminds me like, yeah, set up those moments for ourselves. And yeah, we'll gain greater control over, that you didn't say, I'm just saying discipline, but would you say bliss? What was your
Melissa,
the
yeah.
blissipline? Okay, yeah, the blissipline. Yeah, I love that. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. So
Yeah, and the thing I love, well, yeah, bro, that's I love that you share having your personal practice even while you're teaching, like that, things coming through in that. Like that's to me, that's a depth of devotion and integrity that really speaks to you. And that makes sense, feeling you and just the way you carry yourself. Like there's energy don't lie, ultimately. And we can try to be in our magician and put on a certain face and try to be perceived certain ways, but at the end of the day, like it speaks through the eyes, who we're being, and being in resonance with ourselves. But yeah, one last thing just on the discipline thing, just to tie it all together, like that's to me that's the ultimate power, I think, of this healing journey with our sexual energy, is that it's the path of pleasure. It's using pleasure as a portal of personal transformation and growth, and like who doesn't want that, when we can be making love. I don't know about you. I even use a lot of these practices when I'm working out, when
oh
I'm,
yeah.
like I'm bringing the inner smile, I'm bringing the breath
Yeah.
of like, oh yeah, I'm making love with my pain. I'm making love with the edges. Like it gets fun when you're like bringing that mojo, that sexual energy to all areas of your life, right? It's transformational. So,
hmm Yeah. And I mean, the foundation of it's all very, very simple. So yeah, um, orgasm multiplies love, love multiplies healing. It's all vibrating at the same frequency. So the more we make love to ourselves, the more we feel orgasmic, the body just wants to heal and be at its best. So
hmm.
yeah,
Wow, thanks for that, bro. Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you, JP, for so much, man, for coming on today. It's been a beautiful conversation. Love the work you're doing. Really excited to continue weaving together, and yeah, these potential collaborations we got in the future. Where can people find you online?
at jpkexperience.com. It's my website and socials, Instagram, JPK Experience, YouTube. You can find me on X. And if you do want my more explicit X, it's Nikki with JP.
Yeah, the naked sexual kung fu. Yeah, you the man in that, bro. That's a cutting edge, whole new levels of exploration. So, and
Yeah.
you do one-on-one, you do group trainings, right? Is there any events you got coming up or anything else you want to mention just for people?
Yeah. I do one-on-one work. Currently have space for two more clients. But whenever you're reading this or watching this, just if you feel interested, just send me a message, or you can go to my website and set up a call and apply. And in New York, April 5th and 6th, I'll have a 2-day workshop doing the naked sexual kung fu work. And yeah, getting some other things lined up in LA and possibly with you. So I'll have everything on my website so you guys can check it all out there, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Brother. Right on. Well, enjoy your holidays there in Copenhagen, and yeah, man, we'll be in touch. Thank you everybody for tuning in. See you next time. Big
Thanks,
love.
Ben. Big love.